This wheelchair passenger needs extra screening, the TSA supervisor announced loudly at Denver International Airport security checkpoint. The elderly man in the wheelchair looked embarrassed as agents began their invasive search. "Can't be too careful these days," one agent muttered. "Terrorists use everyone." The old man said nothing, enduring the humiliation with quiet dignity. That's when a Delta Airlines pilot, walking past in his uniform, did a double take. The face was older, the hair white, but those eyes— "Sir," the pilot said, his voice trembling, "are you Falcon 7 inches?" The TSA agents looked confused. They had no idea they were strip-searching a national hero. Welcome to Unsung Hero Stories. Before we dive into this incredible story of dignity under fire, tell us in the comments, from which city are you watching this video today? And if you believe heroes deserve respect regardless of their age or condition, hit that subscribe button. This story will change how you see airport security forever. Denver International Airport, Terminal A. Monday morning, 9:47 a.m. The post-holiday travel rush was in full swing, with thousands of passengers flowing through security checkpoints like water through a dam. Lines stretched for hundreds of yards, patience wore thin, and stress levels ran high. Among the travelers was Colonel James "Jim" Mitchell, 73 years old, seated in a standard airport wheelchair pushed by a young airline assistant. Jim wore a simple gray cardigan, dark slacks, and a worn baseball cap with no insignia. His carry-on bag rested on his lap, a small leather satchel that had seen decades of use. To most observers, Jim looked like any other elderly passenger requiring assistance. His face, weathered by time and sun, showed the quiet resignation of someone accustomed to being overlooked. His legs, covered by a thin blanket, remained motionless as the wheelchair moved through the terminal. The airline assistant who'd been assigned to help him was courteous but detached. "We'll get you through security, sir, then right to your gate. Flight to Colorado Springs leaves in 2 hours." "Thank you," Jim replied, his voice soft but clear. He'd made this journey dozens of times over the past 5 years, visiting the Air Force Academy for various ceremonies and remembrance events. Each trip had become progressively more difficult as his health declined, but he continued making them. Some obligations transcended physical limitations. TSA supervisor. Derek Santos noticed the wheelchair approaching his security station. Santos was 32, had been with TSA for 8 years, and took pride in running an efficient, secure checkpoint. In his experience, wheelchair passengers required extra time and attention, time that slowed down his processing numbers. "Wheelchair passenger coming through," Santos called to his team. "Full secondary screening protocol." The TSA screening area was a maze of metal detectors, X-ray machines, and plastic bins overseen by agents in blue uniforms. The constant noise of conveyor belts, beeping scanners, and passenger conversations created an industrial symphony of modern travel security. "Sir, I need you to transfer from the wheelchair to this screening chair," TSA agent Rodriguez announced, gesturing to a metal chair positioned next to the metal detector. "Standard procedure for mobility-assisted passengers." Jim nodded and began the slow, careful process of moving from his wheelchair. The transition was clearly painful. His legs couldn't support his weight, and he had to rely entirely on his upper body strength to shift between seats. "Come on, sir. We've got a line backing up here," Santos said, glancing at his watch. "Other passengers are waiting." "I'm moving as fast as I can," Jim replied quietly, finally settling into the screening chair. Agent Rodriguez began the physical pat-down, her movements professional but impersonal. "I need to check your legs, sir. Are you able to feel sensation in your lower extremities?" "No," Jim said simply. "Any medical devices, implants, or prosthetics I should know about?" "Spinal injury. No sensation below the waist. Before we continue, imagine being in this situation. Elderly, disabled, surrounded by impatient strangers while uniformed agents search your body. How would you maintain your dignity? Let us know in your comments." Santos supervised the process with growing impatience. "Check his bag thoroughly, and scan him again with the hand wand. Can't be too careful these days." Agent Williams, a younger TSA officer, ran the metal detecting wand over Jim's entire body. When it beeped near his back, Williams frowned. "What's causing this alert, sir?" Shrapnel, Jim said matter-of-factly. Williams looked skeptical. From what? Aircraft accident, long time ago. Yeah, everyone's got a story, Santos muttered, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Scan him again. Make sure we're not missing anything. The secondary screening was becoming a spectacle. Other passengers in line were staring, some taking photos with their phones, others checking their watches with obvious irritation. Jim sat in the metal screening chair, exposed and vulnerable, as agents continued their search. Sir, I need to examine your shoes, Agent Rodriguez said, kneeling down to remove Jim's worn leather loafers. Careful with the left one, Jim warned. The brace inside is custom fitted. Rodriguez pulled out a metal ankle brace, examining it suspiciously. This could be used to conceal contraband. It supports my ankle, Jim explained patiently. I can't walk without it. Santos stepped closer, his voice carrying across the checkpoint. Look, we've got procedures for a reason. Terrorists use disabled passengers as cover all the time. They think we'll go easy on Grandpa in the wheelchair. The comment drew uncomfortable glances from other passengers. An elderly woman in line shook her head in disgust. A business traveler looked away, embarrassed by the public humiliation he was witnessing. Jim's hands gripped the arms of the screening chair, but his expression remained calm. He'd endured worse treatment in worse places, though few people would ever know about those experiences. Are we almost finished? Jim asked quietly. We're finished when I say we're finished, Santos replied. Williams, check his bag again. Something doesn't feel right about this. Agent Williams opened Jim's leather satchel and began removing items one by one. A worn paperback book, prescription medications in labeled bottles, a small photo in a cracked frame, and a metal object wrapped in tissue paper. What's this? Williams held up the wrapped item. Please be careful with that, Jim said, the first note of concern entering his voice. It's very old. Williams unwrapped the tissue to reveal a small piece of twisted metal, blackened and scarred. Looks like aircraft debris. Could be a weapon component. It's a piece of my plane, Jim said, from my last flight. Santos laughed harshly. Right, and I'm Chuck Yeager. Sir, you can't bring unidentified metal objects onto commercial aircraft. I've carried that piece for 50 years, Jim said, his voice remaining steady despite the growing humiliation. It's never been a problem before. Well, it's a problem now. Captain Michael Torres had been flying for Delta Airlines for 15 years, but before that, he'd been an Air Force fighter pilot. Walking through the security checkpoint in his pressed uniform and pilot's cap, he was heading to catch a deadhead flight to Colorado Springs for a family wedding. The commotion at the wheelchair screening area caught his attention. Torres had seen enough TSA overzealousness to recognize it when he saw it, but something about the elderly passenger being searched made him pause. The old man's bearing, despite his obvious physical limitations, suggested military training. The way he sat straight in the screening chair, the calm acceptance of indignity, the quiet responses to aggressive questioning, Torres recognized the pattern. Then he saw the piece of aircraft metal the TSA agent was examining. Torres moved closer, his pilot's eye immediately recognizing the distinctive burn patterns in metal composition. That wasn't debris from a commercial aircraft accident. That was from something else entirely. Excuse me, Torres said, approaching the screening area. I'm Captain Torres, Delta Airlines. Is there a problem here? Santos looked up, annoyed by another interruption. Captain, this is a security matter. Please proceed to your gate. But Torres wasn't looking at Santos. He was looking at Jim, studying his face more carefully. Something about the eyes, the set of the jaw, the way he held himself despite his physical condition. Sir, Torres said to Jim, may I ask your name? Jim looked up at the uniformed pilot. Jim Mitchell. Torres's breath caught. The name was familiar, but it was the voice that confirmed it. He'd heard that voice before, in recordings, in documentaries, in the stories told at the Air Force Academy. Colonel James Mitchell? Torres asked, his voice suddenly respectful. Retired, Jim confirmed. Torres felt his knees go weak. Falcon 7? The name Falcon 7 dropped into the busy security checkpoint like a stone into still water. Most people didn't react. It meant nothing to them. But to Captain Torres, it meant everything. Jesus Christ, Torres whispered, then caught himself. I'm sorry, sir. My God, it's really you. Santos looked back and forth between the pilot and his elderly passenger. "What's this about, Captain?" "You know this man." Torres ignored Santos, his attention entirely focused on Jim. "Sir, Captain Michael Torres, United States Air Force Academy, class of 1998. I wrote my senior thesis on Project OXCART on you." Jim managed a small smile. "Long time ago, son." "Not that long, sir." "What you did, what you accomplished." Torres trailed off, overwhelmed by the moment. Santos was growing frustrated. "Would someone please tell me what's going on here?" Torres turned to face the TSA supervisor, his expression a mixture of awe and anger. "Do you have any idea who you're treating like a criminal?" "A disabled passenger with suspicious metal objects," Santos replied defensively. "That suspicious metal object," Torres said, pointing to the piece of aircraft debris, "is from an SR-71 Blackbird. And this man is Colonel James Mitchell, callsign Falcon 7, the fastest human being who ever lived." The security checkpoint began to quiet as Torres's words carried to nearby passengers and TSA agents. Several people stopped what they were doing to listen. "In 1976, Torres continued, his voice gaining strength, this man flew an SR-71 Blackbird at Mach 3.3 over 2,200 miles per hour at an altitude of 85,000 feet. He held the world speed record for 20 years. He flew reconnaissance missions over the Soviet Union that provided intelligence crucial to ending the Cold War." Santos looked skeptical. "Anyone can make up stories." Torres pulled out his phone and quickly searched for SR-71 pilot records. Within seconds, he found what he was looking for, a photograph of a young Air Force colonel standing next to the iconic black aircraft. "Here," Torres said, showing the screen to Santos, "Colonel James Mitchell, SR-71 pilot, 1974 to 1981. Compare the face." Santos looked at the photograph, then at Jim, then back at the photograph. Even accounting for 50 years of aging, the resemblance was unmistakable. The security checkpoint had transformed from a place of humiliation into something approaching a shrine. Word spread quickly among airport staff, and soon a small crowd had gathered at a respectful distance. "Sir," Torres said, addressing Jim directly, "I need to apologize on behalf of everyone here. This treatment is inexcusable." Jim shook his head. "Son, you have nothing to apologize for. These folks are just doing their job." "No, sir, they're not," Torres replied firmly. "Their job is to provide security with dignity and respect." What happened here was neither dignified nor respectful. An airport police officer, drawn by the gathering crowd, approached the scene. "Is there a problem here?" "Officer," Torres explained, "this gentleman is Colonel James Mitchell, retired Air Force, callsign Falcon 7. He's one of the most decorated test pilots in American history." The police officer's eyes widened. Even he had heard the stories of the SR-71 and its legendary pilots. Santos, meanwhile, was beginning to understand the magnitude of his mistake. "Sir," he said to Jim, we didn't know." "You didn't ask," Jim replied quietly. "You saw an old man in a wheelchair and made assumptions." Torres had retrieved Jim's belongings and was carefully wrapping the piece of SR-71 debris in its tissue paper. "Sir, this belongs in the Smithsonian, not a carry-on bag." "Maybe," Jim said, accepting the returned item, "but it belongs with me first." A Delta Airlines customer service supervisor had appeared, alerted by the commotion. "Colonel Mitchell?" "Sir, I'm Amanda Walsh, customer service. We need to make this right." "Ma'am, I just want to get to my flight," Jim said. "Of course, sir. But please let us upgrade you to first class, and we'll have someone escort you personally to your gate." Jim started to protest, but Torres interrupted. "Sir, with respect, let them do this. It's the least they can do." An hour later, Jim was seated in the Delta Sky Lounge, sipping coffee and waiting for his flight to board. The airline had indeed upgraded him to first class and provided a private escort service. Captain Torres had delayed his own flight to spend time talking with his childhood hero. They sat together in a quiet corner of the lounge, Torres hanging on every word as Jim shared sanitized versions of stories from his flying career. "The SR-71 wasn't just an aircraft," Jim explained. "It was a relationship. You didn't fly the Blackbird. You partnered with it. Every flight was a negotiation between human limitations and engineering possibilities. "What was your fastest flight?" Torres asked. Jim smiled. "That's still classified, son." "But let's just say the official records don't tell the whole story." There was a gentle knock on their table. TSA Supervisor Santos approached, his usual confidence replaced by obvious discomfort. "Colonel Mitchell," Santos began hesitantly. "Sir, I wanted to apologize personally for what happened at the checkpoint." Jim looked up at the younger man. "Mr. Santos, isn't it?" "Yes, sir. Derek Santos. I've been with TSA for 8 years, and what I did today was wrong. The way I treated you was unprofessional and disrespectful." "Derek," Jim said, "sit down." Santos hesitated, then took the offered chair. "You were doing your job," Jim continued. "Security is important. I understand that. But remember, every passenger you screen is someone's father, mother, son, or daughter. They all deserve basic human dignity." "Yes, sir. I'll remember that." Jim reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small card, his business card from his post-retirement consulting work. "If you're ever interested in learning more about aviation history, give me a call. I do talks at the Air Force Academy occasionally. You might find it interesting." Santos accepted the card with trembling hands. "Sir, thank you. I don't deserve this kindness after how I treated you." "Son," Jim said, "we all make mistakes. What matters is what we learn from them." As Jim's flight began boarding, Delta had arranged for him to board first. Captain Torres walked alongside his wheelchair, still marveling at the chance encounter. "Colonel," Torres said, "this has been the honor of my lifetime. Meeting you, hearing your stories. It's reminded me why I became a pilot in the first place." "Keep flying, Michael," Jim replied. "And remember, speed isn't everything. Sometimes the most important thing is getting everyone home safely." At the gate, a small crowd had gathered. Airline employees, airport staff, even some passengers who had heard about the incident. They watched respectfully as the legendary pilot was escorted to his aircraft. As Jim was transferred from his wheelchair to the first-class seat, the flight attendant, a young woman named Sarah, leaned down. "Colonel Mitchell? My grandfather flew F-4s in Vietnam. He always told me stories about the SR-71 pilots. He said you guys were the closest thing to astronauts the Air Force had." Jim smiled. "Your grandfather sounds like a wise man. He passed last year, sir. But he would have been so honored to know I got to serve you today." As the plane pushed back from the gate, Jim looked out the window at the busy airport below. Thousands of travelers, each with their own story, their own journey, their own dignity that deserved respect. The TSA checkpoint incident would be forgotten by most people within days, but for Derek Santos, it would be a turning point, the beginning of a more thoughtful, respectful approach to his job. For Captain Torres, it would be a story he'd tell for the rest of his career, the day he met his hero and learned that legends sometimes travel in wheelchairs. And for Jim Mitchell, it was just another reminder that respect isn't automatic. It's earned through character, maintained through dignity, and shared through simple human kindness. Falcon 7 was going home. So tell us, have you ever witnessed someone being treated poorly because of their age or disability, only to discover they had an incredible background? Have you encountered a veteran whose quiet dignity masked extraordinary achievements? Share their story in the comments. Tell us their name. Honor the heroes who travel among us, asking for nothing but basic human respect. Because at Unsung Hero Stories, we believe that every person deserves dignity, regardless of their age, condition, or appearance. Sometimes the most extraordinary people are the ones who need a wheelchair to travel. Subscribe if this story moved you. We share these powerful stories of hidden heroes every week. And remember, next time you're in an airport security line, look around. The elderly passenger struggling with their shoes might be someone who once flew faster than a bullet, higher than the clouds, carrying out missions that kept our country safe.